Hey, it's a beautiful day out there. It's still going to be warm, obviously. Uh, According to the weatherman, it's going to continue all this week and into next week. But well, I take it. I like it. Just to be truthful. They talked to the sun yesterday, and they're now high temperature during the day is 72 to 74. Nights are down in the 50s, and then of course it's snowing up above the 4,500 foot level. Anyway, they had we left there on the 20th of June, and the temperature was 42 degrees, and it was snowing at the 4,500 foot level. And now it's 1st of September, and it's doing the same thing. Anyway, he's welcome to it. And allergies are not any better out there than they are here. And so, and if you want to run away from mosquitoes, you don't go to Alaska. They'll carry you off up there. And so, anyway, welcome this morning. Glad you're here, and hope you've had a good week last week, and are looking forward to a good one again this week. The, this morning we're going to be looking at the start on the book of Exodus, and the thing that jumps immediately to your mind is to me anyway, is the plagues, and then the leaving and the Exodus and the wilderness and all that. So um, we'll be looking at the book of Exodus. Would you bow with me, please? Father, we thank you for this day and for all the many blessings that you've given unto us. We thank you for where we live, everything you've made available to us in this country, the freedoms that we enjoy to worship you as we understand you want to be worshiped from your word. Father, help us to do that diligently, and help us to seek after you and after your Son. Father, help us to be all that you'd have us to be in your kingdom. Help us to grow each day and look more like him. Father, we would ask you to be with those that aren't with us this morning, that are ill, that they might be returned to their normal health and back to their normal place. Father, again, thank you for all you do for us. Guide us and keep us for you. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. The word Exodus, if all of us think exit immediately, don't we, when we say the word Exodus? Um, and that's what we have come to associate with the book, is them leaving the land of Egypt. But if you go and look the Hebrew word up that is Exodus, it means the names. What? Means the names. It starts out talking about a man and a woman, right? And starts talking about in the 1530 time frame about the man Moses. But it talks about the names. And it's really a continuation about those names and the tribes and the sons of Jacob, a continuation of that lineage that we start reading about in the book of Genesis. And there's some there's some fun reading there when you start chasing the names of those folks and who they are. Who knows who Abraham's brothers? What was his name and where was he from? Nahor. And he was from up in the same area that Abraham settles into when he leaves the Ur of the Chaldees. He was settled in Haran, which is up in what we now call Syria. And he was called the Syrian. And when they start looking for him, his son's name was what? Laban. Right? Laban is the father-in-law of Jacob, right? Yeah. And so we would start chasing those things. And then how many wives did Abraham have? Two. When Sarah died, he married another lady named Keturah and had 6 sons. And one of those sons' name was Midian. And guess where he settled? He settled down on the east side of the Red Sea. where did Moses go? Land of Midian, didn't he? So all those folks that lived in that area turn out to be pretty much kinfolks, don't they? Who were the descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother? Edomites, right? Who didn't let them come through his country or their country on the way into Canaan's land? Edomites. Who'd they fight with? Edomites and Amorites going into Canaan's land. All those folks are wound up being pretty much kinfolks. How many sons did Ishmael have? How many was he promised? He's promised 12 princes. Who did Esau marry? One of Ishmael's daughters. And so when we start looking at names and start chasing all these people and where they come from and where they're going, it gets to be fun. It gets to be fun. Who was Moses' dad and mother? They were both Levites. He was a Levite and she was a Levite. So he's double Levites, right? Amram and Jochebed are Moses' mother and dad. Hello? And guess who she is? She's Moses' aunt. So his mother is his aunt. Hello? Well, some of that had to happen, didn't it? Some of that marrying kinfolks had to happen. Marrying sisters had to happen if Adam and Eve, the only two on the face of the earth, when they start having children, their sons got to marry their daughter. Hello? Hello? Is that logical? Okay. And so they're still marrying cousins when we get down to where did Isaac send Jacob? Send him up to Laban. Nahor, Abraham's brother. Children. Up in Haran and Padan Aram. And so I find maybe I'll get mired down in Manasseh. But you know, to start, when you start reading that stuff, and you say, wait a minute, Midian. There's a place called Midian. And sure enough, that's where Moses goes. So Reuel, who is Moses' daddy-in-law, Moses goes there when he's 40, right? Goes to Midian when he's 40, and he winds up being the son-in-law of a guy named Reuel that winds up with 6 different names in the Old Testament. What? Yep. Calls him Jethro in several places. Calls him Hobab in others. Reuel in some. And so Moses marries Zipporah, his daughter, and they have 2 sons. Eliezer and Gershom. And we don't hear much about those 2 boys, but we hear about the boys of Aaron, don't we? Yeah. And so it's got me studying anyway. Got me looking at stuff in the lineages of all these people and where they're going and what they're doing. And when we go back to Joseph and look at him, who did his brothers sell him to? The 2 that came through the traveling caravans or merchant caravans that came through by where they were raising or watching their flocks for their dad were Midianites from Midian, from one of Abraham's children by Keturah, and the Ishmaelites, which was who? Abraham's son, by Hagar. And so Joseph is sold into slavery in about 1729 BC. When did Abraham live? 1920s BC, almost 2,000 years before Christ. And maybe I'm weird, but I got to have some dates and some stuff to tack on the wall to put stuff in perspective for me. I like history. Yes, sir. Had to be his brothers and sisters. Had to be some of uh, Adam and Eve's offspring, or his brothers and their wives' offspring. Yeah, yeah. Could have been a sister. It had to be a sister or a niece, one or the other. Couldn't have been. How long does it take to populate an area? Depends on how many folks or how many kids the folks have, doesn't it? Uh, well, if you look at Abraham or look at Jacob going into Egypt, and he went there in 1706 BC, roughly, right around 1700 BC. 70 people go into Egypt. In 1450, when they come out, that's how many years? It's almost 300, isn't it? It's 250 years. In 250 years, 70 people have grown to 2.5 to 3 million people. But they're not like us. Betty and I decided 2 were enough. Huh? That's enough. We just replaced ourselves. Okay? My daughter didn't like that idea, so they've got 4 girls. And so who has multiple wives and who has 20 and 30 kids now in our time frame? Huh? Middle East. Muslim. What's their goal? To make a caliphate out of the whole world. Okay. So they've got more than one wife, and they have more than one child. If you look at what they're doing to Europe, when they get 20% of the population, they start uprising, okay? Hello? And that's what they're doing. They're moving into every country in the world to do that. And they don't stop at one child. They have multiples, okay? These folks did too. That sort of stopped. My grandfather, on my dad's side, they had 13 children. 4 of them died before age 2. 2 were born dead. 2 died before age 2. So they wound up raising 9 children. My grandfather was shorter than I am. Little guy. He had a stroke when he was 12 years old and had no use of his left hand at all. But his right hand, he'd put you on your knees, and he thought that was funny. Women and all. Little guys do strange things to show that they are almost as good as big folk. Huh? Ask me. I've been about this size all my life, except I'm fatter than I used to be. I've been about this tall all my life. But that sort of stopped in the farming community, didn't it? My grandfather on my mother's side, they had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And he farmed, and they learned about farming and stayed with it for a while. But they decided that wasn't for them, and that farm is now over in the industrial park. These people grow from 70 people in 1700, roughly, BC, to 2.5, 3 million people. And that's 250 years. Um, there's some numbers in this book that are crosswalks that we'll look at. 40 is one. Moses' life is divided up into 3 40-year blocks, isn't it? First 40 years, he's in Pharaoh's house. And he goes down, and there's some conjecture you can do and some, I think, logic. It has to go with the story of Moses about why he's down there watching his kinfolks. Because when he gets to Midian and helps Rule's daughters water the flock, when they go to the house, they said an Egyptian helped us. Didn't say a Hebrew helped us. Didn't say some of our old kinfolks helped us. Said an Egyptian helped us water the flock. That's why we are home early. Rule says, where is he? Bring him in. Let's feed him. He winds up marrying one of the girls. He's there 40 years. So when he comes out and goes to Egypt under God's direction, he's 80 years old. Hello? Anybody in here 80? I got 2 years to wait on 80. Okay. And I don't want to lead 2.5 million people out in the desert. Hello? No. I can get a half a day's work done in about 3.5 days now. And, that's about my speed. And, I go out and I can walk out to the little shed, we'll do a little work in the yard, come back in the house and be wringing wet, and I'll sit and dry off. Then I'll go back out and get wet again, sweating. But, the 30 minutes of work is interrupted by an hour of resting. Yes, sir. Hello. And my wife claims I don't have enough sense to get in out of the rain. So, anyway, but Jethro is another name for Reuel. Hobad is another name. But anyway, Jethro comes and tells Moses how to do that, doesn't he? He says, you break those folks down into tens, hundreds, thousands. And you talk to the leaders of the tribes. You don't talk to the thousands, and you don't talk to the tens. You don't talk to the leaders of them. You talk to the tribal leader. Well, do a little math. All of them are living in tents, right? Yeah. They don't have a camper, or fifth wheel, or motor home. There's 2.5 million, if you take the minimum, 2.5 million people that are moving through an area. How big do you think that area is? It will take all of their flocks and their children, all their servants, and everybody. How big an area do they need for camping? It's estimated that if they put them in the northern part of Alabama, that it'd be down to Russellville and all the way across the state would be the campground for 2.5 million. How many gallons of water do they need a day to water their flock and them? Just for drinking water, not bathing water, because I would assume that they didn't bathe but once a year. Huh? And they didn't have no speed sticks and deodorant and that kind of stuff. When you go out west, start talking and you look into how they did when we were conquering the West in our country. How many people do you think took a bath in December? About that many. Well, you ever take a bath outside in the December time frame? Did that once. We were out at north of Hornsville, up close to the Czech border, in our GDP location, and we were out there, and it was for Reforger, which was a big operation that went on for 6 weeks in Germany every year. And I got tired of smelling meat. And we had the Lister bag out there, and I went out there and after dark, snow on the ground, and I took me a bath in my helmet. That was cold. Woke up the next morning, and we had, of course, had a air mattress, a sleeping bag, and a poncho, and there was about 3 inches of snow on top of my sleeping bag. And I didn't take any more baths out in the woods, but anyway. So, you can sort of imagine what a nice, and the cows, all them cows. I don't know how many head of cows they had. Because they had grown in the land of Goshen to the point that the king of Egypt says they are a threat to us. If we go to war, they'll join our enemy and they will take us over. Okay? So how many people did the Egyptians? I would rough estimates about 5 million. And they're spread out. Egypt, pretty good sized place. Most of them live in the Nile River Valley and in the delta of it, because that's where you can grow stuff. But anyway, imagine 2.5 million people out in the wilderness, out in the desert, and what they need to survive. How many gallons of water? We started on that. It's estimated 11 million gallons of water was needed to keep them hydrated and their animals hydrated a day. How much food? 160 boxcars of food to feed 2.5 million people. Well, how many people live in Atlanta? It's about 2.5 million, isn't it? 2.5, 3, somewhere around that noise level right now. Is that about right, Jimmy? Okay, Roswell and all up to it. Yeah. So how much food does it get shipped into Atlanta on a daily basis? So that's a lot of stuff, isn't it? And so when Moses strikes the rock to get the water, what kind of gusher was it to get 11 million gallons? Now, if you're over there by Iuka, and the water is at Huntsville, you got a long trek to get your family over there to get some water, don't you? There's got to be more than one water point for that many people. But anyway, those are just some things to throw around in your mind when we're talking about what these people are doing on a daily basis out there in the wilderness. So that's first 40 years is with Pharaoh. You know the story. It starts out that this man and woman have a child, and he's a good-looking boy, and he's a good example and all that stuff, and she puts him in a basket when he's 3 months old and pitches it and all that sort of thing and puts it in the Nile River in the reeds. Pharaoh's daughter comes down to bathe, brings her a handmaid. She sees the ark there and has her handmaid fetch it. And there's Moses. And he cries and she has compassion. Who's watching? Who's watching? Moses' sister. Who is that? Miriam is her name. Moses' brother's Aaron. His sister is Miriam. Chapter 6, verse 20. Anyway, his sister is watching this go on, and she goes up to Pharaoh's daughter. and could tell that Pharaoh's daughter obviously likes this kid. And she says, would you like me to find you a handmaid for the baby? You talk about God interfering. Huh? Pharaoh's daughter says, yeah, and she pays Jochebed, Moses' mother, to watch him and nurse him and look after him. How long? Well, if you go to the Mideast, start looking, how long was Muhammad farmed out to a nursemaid? Till he was 5. So Moses' mother got to watch him till he was somewhere in the 4 or 5 year old Noah's level. So that may be where he gets his compassion for his Hebrew kinsman that the Egyptian is given a hard time to, and he kills an Egyptian when he's 40. So he knows some right and wrong, doesn't he? His mother has taught him some of that. But now, there's no temple, there's no tabernacle, there's no 10 commandments, there are no what we call priests. They're just 12 tribes of kinsmen that are descendants of Jacob, descendants of Isaac, descendants of Abraham. And what's the promise? Abraham, I'm going to make you a great nation. Make you a great nation. Isaac, what's the promise? The promise is the same as it was for Abraham. It's going to be carried on by you. The promise is to Jacob. It's the same promise. It's going to be a great nation. So what are we going to look at in Exodus? We're going to look at God making a great nation out of 70 people that he has chosen. Not that chose him. He chose them to make a great nation out of. One that will bring fear to their neighbors. Bring fear. You know, when the story gets spread that all the firstborn of animals and people died in Egypt on the same night at the same time. Think about that. All Egyptians, firstborn, old and young, died that night. Not only of the people, but of the animals. Every firstborn. Died. Don't you know that there were visitors, like the Midianites, that were traveling salesmen, basically? Merchandise caravans. That word spread throughout the Middle East. And everywhere they came up on, I don't blame Edomites. I don't blame them. I want you coming through my country either. No, I'm not. I like legals in my country. Anyway, the king decides that there are too many of Jacob's descendants in his country. They will turn on us. Why would they turn on them? For what they're being done to. You know, they're making brick to build the city of Ramses and 2 or 3 others in that time frame. And the straw had been furnished and the clay had been furnished, and now they're having to go out and scrounge it and get it and bring it in, and the workload didn't diminish. They didn't take anything away. Now, what did they do to them? Beat them. You know? And the next day when you go to work, you not only are you tired and sore from working, you are tired and sore from being beaten. And it may happen again today and again tomorrow and the next day. They're slaves. That's what they are. You know, here's a sidelight off of that. Sidelight. Do you know that a Jew or a descendant of Abraham under the old law could not be a slave? You couldn't take one of your brothers, Hebrew brethren, and make him slave. He had to volunteer to be your servant in the year of Jubilee. They didn't have slaves. Were they slaves? Yes, by the Romans and by other countries, by the Assyrian, by the Syrian, by the Babylonian, yeah, by the Medo-Persian, yeah. But they didn't own their brother, sister, slavery. They could sell themselves to you for their work and for their hire for a period not to exceed 39 years. Excuse me, 49. The 50th year was Jubilee, and they were freed on that 50th year. So what they really, land was the same way. You couldn't buy land and own it in perpetuity, because in the 50th year Jubilee, it reverts back to the original family that owned it. And it stayed with them. So what they're really doing is leasing their land for a period of up to 49 years. They're not selling it. They're leasing it. That's what we would call it under our law, is a lease. And so they learned some things from Egypt, didn't they? And God gave them some rules to live by based on what happened to them in Egypt. God delivers his promise to Abraham. He made that promise in 1921 BC, almost 2,000 years before Christ, and he delivers on it. He made that promise in Genesis 12. We see the forming of that great nation, that Israelite nation. I guess one of my sermons that I used to do, and might still do if I ever had another chance to preach, is One More Night with the Frogs. It's very interesting when we start looking at the plagues. When did Pharaoh want them to go away? Now, the blood stayed 7 days, right? Blood in the river and all that stayed 7 days. Next one's frogs, and they're everywhere. Everywhere. So when he calls Moses, and he knows who God's man is by this time, doesn't he? Yes, sir. He knows. Who can get the frogs gone? And it's Moses. And so he talks to him, and he says, get rid of the frogs. He says, when you want that done? He says, tomorrow. He can take one more night with the frogs. I bet his wife was happy. Huh? The frogs everywhere. They were in the flour for the making of bread. They were in the bed. They were in the pots and the pans. And if you didn't have a fire in the oven, there was frogs in there. Walk outside and you can't not step on them. They're everywhere. It said when they died, they piled them up in heaps and the whole place stank. What's the corollary for that for us today? Don't bother me with Jesus Christ today. I'll take one more night. Wait till tomorrow. Give me another day. Sounds like Felix, doesn't it? One more night. I think that's an important lesson for us to look at. But the big one is Passover, isn't it? And what's Passover? What's that meal that they do? What does that remind you of? Lord's Supper. Last night with the disciples. The Last Supper. The last meal in Egypt. The last meal under this. The last and the first. Wow. That's a big lesson. So we're going to look at that down the road and some of that. Parting of the Red Sea. You know, a lot of antichrists would like for you to believe that where they went through the Red Sea was just in a little tributary area and it wasn't over ankle deep. Whose army drowned in that river or in that sea? Pharaoh. Yeah. His whole army is in the Red Sea when it comes back, when the Hebrews are out of it. They're on dry land, and here comes Pharaoh's army. Chariots, pulled by their horses, their camel riders and raiders, and their foot soldiers and all are in the Red Sea, and the Red Sea comes back on them, and they all die. What does that amount to? What's like that? Remember the Assyrian army, 185,000 die in one night, and not by a sword from the Israelite, dies by God's hand. They have surrounded Jerusalem and sent threats to the king. Pharaoh has said, let them go, and he can't stand it, and he has to go chase them. They die, his whole army. And Joseph and Moses and them are on the other side. Moses is born in 1530. That's 176 years after Jacob dies. He leaves the house of Pharaoh at age 40, returns to Egypt in 1450 BC as the leader of the Israelites, and he's 80 years old. His brother Aaron is 83. 83. He's 3 years older than Moses. What happened between Aaron's birth and Moses' birth? The Pharaoh decides he'll kill all the male children that are born to the Hebrews in his country because they are a threat to his kingship. You know, you threaten power and power gets rough, right? For an example, who was the only survivor of Saul's house when David takes over king as of Judah? The crippled Mephibosheth was the only descendant that David could find of Saul's still alive. Because Saul was a threat to the power, right? But David didn't kill Mephibosheth. He brought him into his house, and he kept him and fed him and gave him all of the things that Saul owned, everything, and kept him in his house and fed him for the rest of his life. That's a difference, isn't it? Big difference in Saul and David as far as how he treats other people. The exodus from Egypt is somewhere around 1440 BC. What happens after that? They're out and they leave in 1440 and they wander till 1400. Because when they get up and ready to go into the land of Canaan, what happens? We just had a Wednesday night on that, didn't we? Yeah. About the spies. 12 spies are sent out, one from each tribe. 2 of them come back, 2 out of 12 come back and say, we can do it. 10 say we can't. And they decide they can't take the land of Canaan. And that's after the parting of the Red Sea, and that's after 1 million gallons of water a day, 11 million gallons of water a day, 160 boxcar loads of food a day. Clothes don't wear out, shoes don't wear out, flocks are fed and multiply, and hello. And here we are, ready to cross the Jordan, and we can't go in and take it. You ever Spent 2 years in Vietnam. They wouldn't let us win. We never lost a battle. Never lost a battle. We could have wound that thing up in 6 months. There's 500,000 of us over there. And we did our job, and we could do it real well, really well. But we'd go out and win the battle and go back to base camp. 2 weeks later, we're out there taking the same territory again. What was the lesson? Second time I saw that happen, I said, "You're going to go home alive. You ain't going to mess around with these folks." That's my goal. My goal wasn't to win the war because they wasn't going to let us. That's what they had. That's what the Israelites had. That's what Moses was putting up with. The can't do's, the naysayers. God says, "It's yours. I'm going to give it to you. I'll give it to you." They didn't take it. So every one of them that was 20 years old or older died in the wilderness. 40 years they spent wandering around out there. 40 years. That's 40 years of Moses' life, isn't it? Yeah. He's going to be 120 and not get to go in. He got to get up on top of the mountain and look over into Canaan's land and see it. You know, when we look at Ruth and Naomi could stand in Moab and look over and see Bethlehem. Wow. See. And so those 40 years are tough. Those 40 years are tough. Anyway, lots of stuff. Do some looking back at genealogies and then tracing those names and see if they turn up the same thing I turned up, you know, like Midian and Abraham's son by Keturah. Oh, and look at Moses' mother was his aunt also. Now, what did he call her? Mother, probably, right? She got to teach him and look at her and get paid to do it. Hello? You don't think God had a hand in that? Yes, he did, obviously. Because the Pharaoh said, "Kill him." And his daughter, Pharaoh's daughter, sees this child, male child, and has compassion on him and defies her father. God had to have a hand in that one. Had to have a hand in it. A lot of interesting stuff. Folks, I got some parallels, but I'll cover that next week because we're right down to the wire. Bell should be ringing right according to that clock.